It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
I think the 40s is the decade of realizing you're mortal. I know it sounds heavy.
It does sound
it's
super
not, but I don't. I
morbid.
won't. I think it's actually a positive thing. Is that I'm much more sentimental, but I'm also. It's one of those points where I think it is a division point in the road where you figure out: is it a life well lived to this point, or am I way behind and I need to really recalibrate? Because this is also I've shared with you guys. I had a pastor who I became friends with who shared with me. Age 40 was the age he made sure he still could go run or do things in shape, because if you don't make a commitment to yourself physically, your physical body, when you're in your 40s, you're taking it for granted in a very tipping point of where your life is going. I think the same thing happens to your financial life as well. So do not take for granted where you are with your health, your wealth, or what's going on with your financial situation.
So you've already defined the 40s as sort of this transition period. What we were talking about in show prep and our pre-show meetings, the inner 20s and 30s, we're always focused on, okay, well, how much should I be saving to get to X number? How much do I need to save if I want to be a millionaire? How much do I want to save? Well, we said, we ought to flip the paradigm a little bit. And we came up with this idea that rather than talking about, if I start at zero, what will it take to get to $1 million? We said, if I've been doing what I'm supposed to have been doing, how much do I need to have acquired by 40 to be on the track to millionaire status? So we came up with, hot off the presses, a brand new deliverable. If you want to go out to our website, you can go to moneyguy.com/resources. And this deliverable is out there. The power of starting young, the power of your army of dollar bills, showing that if by the time you get to your 40s, you have saved $136,000 without saving another dollar, you are already on track to be a millionaire by the time you're 65. Now, that does not mean stop saving, because what happens is if you're also saving, the number is $1,800 per month at 40, then you're on track for $2 million if you can do the saving and you've built it up. Let this deliverable be the thing that encourages you that the hard work that you have been doing is going to pay off if you stay the course.
I think it's interesting, Bo, is if you take somebody who's 24 years of age, who's that oldest Gen Zer currently, we talked about where their debt is, and we came in right around $11,000, $10,942. Your eyesight's much better than mine, but what does a 24-year-old have to have?
$19,800, just a touch under $20,000.
So can you see how, guys, if you flip the script and think about the opportunity cost lost of your debt, and we did the same thing to a 39-year-old. I mean, you can see a 39-year-old, according to our last slide, with somebody, with $27,000 worth of average debt. A 39-year-old, what's the number on that?
It's $122,000 that they'd have to have accumulated without saving another dime. They're already on their track for millionaire status.
So you can see how these numbers are getting bigger on what's required of you. They're so much easier, so much smaller while you're younger. Don't miss the opportunity, because even though you're getting your 40s, you might be thinking, wow, have I missed the opportunity? No, there is still a multiplier effect to every dollar you invest. So do not walk away from that opportunity, because you too can still build wealth just by starting and letting your army of dollar bills be super powerful.
Now, I think this is interesting, Brian. You said, okay, if you started early on in your journey, then it's a marathon. But if you're waiting until 40s, you might have to work a little bit harder. You might have to push a little bit harder. And what we've seen is that same thing is true for debt. Because if we look at the average debt load of a Generation Xer, right? This is where you fall. These are those folks that are from 41 to 56. Their average auto loan debt is $21,500. Their average credit card debt has grown. They've not gotten better in their 20s and 30s. They've gotten worse. Now it's almost $8,000 in credit card debt. The average mortgage is $245,000, so they've upgraded their homes, and the average student loan is almost $40,000 for Generation Xers, those folks in that 40-ish time range.
So let's talk about the biggest hang-ups or risks that we have with debt. And look, this is one, it's back to high school all over again, mortgage. I mean, because I think that you have to figure out, if you're a responsible person, is how much is enough on like your house. Because you can always move the goalpost, get a bigger house, move to a nicer neighborhood. You've actually given in previous shows, but we didn't talk about this in show planning, and you get this from one of your mentors. They told you a person ought to, in their 20s or even 30s, write down what their biggest, nicest house that they think that they want is. When you reach that, don't keep looking upstream, because that's the problem I think most people have, is that what your 20-year-old self starts as being success, you're going to get there, and when you get there, instead of enjoying and celebrating the success, the hedonic treadmill will kick in, and you'll start thinking of what's next. And that's a problem with human nature, and we see it, and that's what I'm telling you. Your biggest risk is paying attention to that mortgage debt, because I'm hoping that you get a kind of a grip on where your debt is in your 40s, so you can approach retirement completely debt-free. But if you're adding more and more and more debt, you'll never get out of debt, and you're actually walking away from reaching that debt-free financial independence that comes with having assets in the bank, investments out there in the marketplace, and then zero debt that you owe anyone, because you're truly financially independent.
And so if you want to do it right, if you want to think about navigating a mortgage right, the tips and tricks and rules of thumb are very similar when you're in your 40s than when you're in your 30s. You want to make sure that any real estate decision you make is a long-term decision. You can commit to being in that house for the next 5 to 7 years. If there are things like job changes or family changes that might alter that, perhaps now is not the time to take on new debt, to go buy a new house, to go get into a new mortgage. We said for your first-time home purchase, you don't have to put 20% down. But if you're in your 40s and you are now buying your second home, or you're moving to your dream home, or you're upgrading, you've got to put down 20%. Don't fake it just because you can. If you remember that you put down 5% when you bought your house when you were 30, don't just think at 45 you can put down 5% and you're going to be okay, because your army of dollar bills does not have the same juice that it once did. And then, of course, you have to make sure that you keep it inside that acceptable range. Your total monthly housing costs cannot exceed 25% of your gross income.
Well, I'm going to go even deeper too, is that, look, we talked about for the 20 and 30-year-olds, I want you to do a 30-year mortgage. And I'm still going to give permission for my 40-somethings to also do a 30-year mortgage with this caveat. Treat it like it's a 15-year mortgage, because the spread between the 15 and 30 is not so much, especially with interest rates below 3% like they currently are, is that I am going to encourage you to get the 30 years so you have that added flexibility, but try to pay it off like a 15-year mortgage. Because look, guys, I give you permission, and Bo picks on me. He says I'm very bad at math on this, but I think that you do in your mid-40s, you cross a maximization versus analyzing risk as well as simplifying your life, that I think it gets to be okay to pay off all debt, regardless of where the interest rate is, just because you can see retirement in the near term and you want to be completely debt-free. So that's why I'm giving you guys permission that once you're over 45, it's okay to start prepaying that low interest debt, as long as you've made it through the other steps of the financial order of operation. You've paid respect to saving, that dollar in your Roth. You've paid respect to maximizing your retirement plan. It's okay now if you quit maximizing, but you reduce risk, because you're looking at financial independence and how you can protect yourself. That's okay. And I think that's where a lot of people never take their foot off the accelerator of building debt. And that's a problem. Absolutely. They're never truly financially independent.
And so if the house, the mortgage, is a big hang up that we see in our 40s, I'm sort of surprised that the next one is still a big hang-up, because you would think that by your 40s, you're a little bit older, you're a little bit wiser, you have some life experience, you've learned from your past mistakes, and yet credit cards are still an issue that we see folks in their 40s struggle with. The average credit card balance for a Gen Xer is almost $8,000. And frankly, by this stage of life, credit card debt should be no-go land. It should be absolutely nothing. It's not like you're early on figuring it out, still trying to understand what's going on. You should not have credit card debt.
When Daniel pulls these stats, these are people who are carrying balances. So this number is legit, is that it's close to $8,000 for, the Gen Xers out there in credit card debt. I mean, I look at that as you really are indebted. I mean, you are indentured to continue to work, to continue not to live for yourself. You're living to pay back debt, and that's just not where you want to be as you're approaching closing out your 40s and heading towards your 50s and 60s.
Now, you said some cold water here, Brian. You said, look, if you're someone in your 40s and you still got credit card debt, perhaps credit cards aren't for you. Perhaps this is the point where you get that last credit card paid off, and then you cut them up, you get rid of them, you put them in a drawer, you freeze them, you do whatever you have to do, but this tool just might not be the tool for you.
Well, that leads to, I mean, this one's even more heartbreaking. I don't like credit card debt because I think that shows that there's a lifestyle element potentially, and that leads right into this horrible lifestyle element of cars, auto debt. This is the part that blows my mind, is that we continue to watch by decade, the auto debt goes up. You would think at some point people go, maybe I should be buying used cars, or maybe I should be paying cash for my vehicles. We actually see people getting older, buying nicer homes, and that's just using debt to make yourself look good. But like I said, you are rotting inside out on your financial life.
And look, the auto industry is not doing you any favors. They're not actually trying to help you build your army of dollar bills, because we know that the average auto loan term for new cars is now up to 72 months. It is up to 6 years. A lot of folks don't even drive cars for 6 years. We know that 1 in 3 folks who trade in their vehicle are actually underwater on the loan. So they're just rolling negative equity in. That is not good. And if you are not protecting yourself from this, then the industry itself will just come eat you up.
So how do we do it right, Bo? Let's talk about this. I know we've covered it for our 20-year-olds, our 30-year-olds, but it's worth repeating. 23A, give them the ins and outs of how this works.
So 23A, you want to make sure that you put 20% down whenever you buy a car, new or used. You don't want to finance it for any more than 3 years or 36 months, and your total auto payment across all the cars that you own cannot exceed 8% of your gross income. And if you buy a luxury brand, a Mercedes, a BMW, a Tesla, a fill in the blank, you have to pay it off within 1 year.
And you always need to be investing more than your car payment. You don't get to go past that point. That's a key one.
So when we think about how much car can we afford, we look at how much can we afford from an auto standpoint. The median household, if you look at median household incomes, can afford about an $18,000 car, $17,700. But the average car loan right now in this country is $34,000. We don't have a debt problem. We have a spending problem from people buying more car than they can afford. If you follow 23.8 and stay inside the lines, it will protect you from getting completely out of whack.
And the lion's share of that $34,000 is new cars.
Yep.
That is new car debt. So you can see that's the reason that Daniel put a fancy sports car there, whereas it's a much more reasonable sedan over there on the $17,000 to $18,000. Don't fake your life, guys. Nobody's going to be impressed with you at the light. Your neighbors don't care what car you drive. Your future self will thank you if you make the right financial decisions now.
Okay, so how do we stack up with our peers in our 40s? Well, remember that Gen Z had average debt, not including mortgage, of about $11,000. Millennials in that 25 to 40 range had average debt of $27,000. Well, by the time we get to Gen X, the average debt load for Gen Xers is about $33,000, not including their mortgage debt. That makes me sad because I think by this stage, your debt ought to be decreasing, not increasing.
I just like to see that I'm in the middle of the Gen X. I'm so far. All you that call me boomers, take that. I'm nowhere near the boomer status. So I see you just trying to throw some shade my way. But that is a good segue into let's talk about those 50s and beyond.